Okay, so even I learned something from those two presentations. The thing I learned was, now I remember why we kept a lot of the DODAF stuff out of the FIAC framework. There was a large debate back in the early days of the Federal Enterprise Architecture Framework about bringing the DODAF models into the framework and integrating them into the framework. And there was a raging battle between the civilian agencies and the people from the Department of Defense. And Rob and I were kind of sitting in the middle demarcation line between those two as they threw paper wads at one another. So back in the early days again. The next presentation we have looks like a really interesting panel. It's entitled Deriving Business Value with EA, Lessons from the Public and Private Sectors. And we have a number of people who have both long-standing relationships with FIAC as well as who bring perspectives from the contractor side of doing business with the government, primarily those folks from Northrop, Grumman, and Lockheed Martin. We have the moderator of the session is Dr. Steve Hudock, who's the chief architect from Northrop Grumman. Steve is a long good friend of the FIAC Institute. Melvin Greer, who is a senior fellow with Lockheed Martin. Melvin is a graduate of our program, and also he's an instructor in our program. Tim Honeycutt, senior associate with Booz Allen Hamilton. And last but certainly not least, my good friend, Mr. Rob Thomas, Enterprise Transformation Strategy Executive with Accenture, and he's now also a FIAC Institute faculty member. So that group, if you would come forward, please, and take command of the stage. While they're coming up, let me just give you a brief. After this session, we'll have about a 15-minute networking break. Then we have a presentation on the perspectives and value of planning versus firefighting. And then we'll have a progress report from Walt Ocon on the architect's competency framework. Those who haven't heard anything about this or don't know what this competency framework is about, you may find this particularly interesting because what it does is it characterizes the roles and responsibilities of enterprise architects in the DoD, and I think there's a number of groups looking at extending this competency framework to the whole practice and profession of enterprise architecture, not just with a DoD focus, but for the whole practice. And then we'll have a certified architects open forum. Dr. Bellman will be leading that, and lastly we'll have some wrap-up and closing remarks from Felix, and then we'll get to the libations. So Dr. Steve Hudock now will...
We're all happy to be here today and talk to you about deriving business value with enterprise architecture. It's been a long road, as both Mike and Felix and certainly other folks that were awarded a little earlier can attest. But we've come through a situation where we've seen the evolution of multiple frameworks that have been derived from the early Zachlin model. You're all familiar, of course, with FIAC and DODAF and TOGAF, etc. But we've seen many EA successes in the public-private sectors that have applied these frameworks. Some of our friends from HHS, as we saw this morning, Department of Interior, IBM on the commercial side. And we've also noticed that EA has been embraced internationally now. We're seeing it in the UK and in Australia and in some minor roles, hopefully soon to be major roles, in China. So we're watching the enterprise architecture sweep around the globe and permeate the business world. We've also noticed that the normal EA engagements that yield a lot of positive results, but there have been mistakes. And in this town, I'm not going to name any names, but you don't have to look far to find out who's not had successes because they've had difficulty in their implementation process, or more importantly, they've had difficulty in their education process prior to the implementation, prior to attempting an implementation. We found that EA introduces and requires a culture and disciplines that were previously overlooked or lacking within the organization, to include things such as basic requirements definition or linking technology with business goals. If you don't do that, you're not going to see the successes that you want. There are many examples of where and how EA has impacted organization and businesses, particularly if we look at the federal arena, the CPIC process. We look at timely business decisions being executed in the commercial world, and we looked at technological investments that are being made both in the private and public sectors. But what do we get when we look beyond enterprise architecture? What value has been derived from the execution of a successful EA? And what happens after the organization has provided the EA training and familiarization, has defined a taxonomy for metadata, has built an EA repository and populated it, has instituted a governance process? How does EA really make a difference? Where's the beef? Within Northrop Grumman, we've seen and experienced a significant value to enterprise architecture, building one internally within our organization, binding our technical reference models with our systems reference models and our business reference models. A long, tenuous road, but we're getting there. We've been aggressively educating and communicating EA principles within the company. We have more than 140 certified enterprise architects, thanks to Mike and Felix and the organization at FIAC. And we have a heavy internal communications process where folks share their enterprise architecture experiences across the company to extend and increase our capabilities. We've also successfully assisted a number of customers in achieving functional EA, including those that you see listed here today, delighting these customers with their enterprise architectures. Just assisting them, the information is there, just helping them organize it, use it, and display it. And then recently we've internally instituted an architecture-centric engineering practice within our own company to help our engineers focus their efforts for integrated systems, making EA work for our enterprise. If we look across the 5 Northrop Grumman operating sectors today, we find that enterprise architecture is a parcel process and product to all 5 of our systems, or all 5 of our sectors. So we have made great strides in the last 5 years in this area. What I'm going to do today now is open up to our panel to address the value of their EA successes specifically. Rob Thomas from Accenture will follow me, and then he'll introduce Melvin Gitter of Lockheed Martin. Please, Rob.